eastern part of the Carpathian Desert, inside Romania, the central part of Romania, Transylvania, where I live and where we work. And how it started, when I was a young archaeologist, and I went back from Budapest, I studied there. And I made my first researches on medieval monuments. I saw these bell towers with Gothic-shaped windows, and I made some kind of observations regarding that this should be post-medieval. And all of them were described in the literature as typical Gothic, late Gothic towers. Even if we had inscriptions, epigraphic inscriptions and documents that these are later. But as you know, most of you, there are these huge monographs written by the professors, and there are some kind of axioms you cannot question. And when I was talking to my ex-professor, that professor, I guess that this tower should be later because this. He told me that archaeologists go deep and don't deal with things you cannot relate. So therefore, that frustrated me very much, and I said that I need a method, I need a source which can support my thesis about the chronology, about the periodization of these monuments. So even when I show them on several conferences that I have written sources that these towers were built between these 2 days, as you've seen in the Hungarian, in the Latin, it's the same, edificalizeta, the construction was started this then and finished then. I was told that you are not an art historian, go deep, don't work with monuments because you don't have nothing to do with it. So that was a frustration. I guess you understand all of it. So these are the so-called Gothic bell towers in my homeland, in a very small homeland, which is the upper valley of the river. So I said that if written sources, my observations, epigraphic data is not enough, I will find something to prove my truth. So this is how I came to dendrochronology. So dendrochronology as a term comes from Greek. You probably know much better than me. It's made from dendro, wood, chronos, time, and logos, knowing it's science. So the science, the method connected with the age of wood somehow. And how does it work? So as you probably know, when the wood, the tree starts to live, each year it makes a year ring. And so this is the earliest, and as we go to the bar, to the exterior, these are the younger rings. So this should be simply nothing, you know it all from kindergarten. Inside the ring there are 2 separate parts. This is hardcore biology. I know only the surface of its part. When I go to dendrochronological conferences, I don't understand half of it because they talk so much about details of inner cell things that I have nothing to do with it. But even so the ring wood is made from early wood and late wood. The early wood forms in the early vegetation period. Right now, the tree comes to life, the winter has passed, and it starts to grow. And in the early wood, it grows very fast, and in the late wood, from August to November till his leaves, the late wood is much denser. Why is it important? Because in many cases, as I will show you, it is very sharp date regarding when the tree was felled, when it was cut. And let's see forward. So as you see, the reaction, these are the good years, so-called good years. The tree had good conditions, and that year he grew fast. The ring, the earring is very large. And in the bad years, let's call it void, or precipitation, something was missing for growing of the tree, so the earring is much narrow. And these series, these year ring series can be measured in a special table with special equipment, with special software. It can be digitalized, and after this process we have the history of the wood, or when he was starting, when he was coming to life, and when he died, or when he was cut. So this would be the principles of dendrochronology. So when we have a recent tree which was cut in this year, 2025, and we have the series of him on when he lived, and we have interlacing with the earlier wood which had a common period of time when they lived. The young one was already living, the old one was still living, and they had a common period of time, at least 30 years, which are overlapping, interlacing. So with each of these principles, we can build a virtual tree to the past. And from many samples, from many trees, we can construct so-called master chronology. So the principles are, how should I say, very on the hand. Trees from the same species and from the same region, they suffer the same climatic conditions in one year, similar. So their response to these conditions should be similar or alike. In a bad year, all of them should have narrow rings. In a good year, they should have bigger rings or larger rings. So the history of the tree should reflect the history of the climate, the history of the region, and then we combine these trees and we have the so-called master chronology made from the same species, from the same region, from different period wood elements, timber elements, and we have the chronology when we have an unknown sample from a tree, from a sheep, from a roof. We are measuring it, and we have to find the place where it best interlaps, where it best interacts with the chronology. And in this case, we have the datation, we have the period when the tree was living, and we have the year when the tree was cut. So this should be done very easily or very simple, but it's not that simple. Why? Because the ring of it is influenced by many factors, not just climate. So climate is one, humidity, precipitation, and temperature is one thing, but naturally it's influenced by some competition. You can imagine that a small tree in a big forest is struggling to get some light, to get some precipitation, to get some nutrition, because the bigger ones are taking all of them. So his rings or her rings, I don't know the gender of the tree, is not that characteristic because his competition with the bigger ones. Another thing, the forestry activity. When you cut a tree in a certain region and you left only one, suddenly he has lost his competition. Suddenly he wakes up that I have sun, I have precipitation, I don't have continents, so I start to grow faster. So that also influences the ring width. And also animals, when they interact, when they hurt the tree somewhere, also the fire and genetics. And most important, when we usually forget, it's the location. Because when we go to a roof or we go taking samples, we only see a beam, a piece of wood, but we don't know nothing about his history, when he is coming from. So you can imagine that if he was growing in a hill, in a rocky hill, his ring widths won't be the same as those from the valley near the water when he was growing very calmly, very easily. And naturally, water table and rustic strata, and also the soft soil can influence very hard. If he has so-called neutral circumstances, the ring widths will be similar or not that specific. If he grows in a rocky place, also his ring widths will be different, or if her or she, I don't know, he lives in a moisture region, the ring widths will be different. Why is this important? Because when we do something we don't know nothing about, we have only beams. So therefore we always say to the priest or the property or the researcher, the architect who asks us our help, what need more samples, at least 5, 4, 10 or more. And you're saying why? It will be expensive. Yes, but we need more samples because we measure all of them and we make a medium. So with this method we hope to exclude this individual background, historical background which we don't know, and we hope that with this medium we are closer to the medial general climate influences which made their impact on the tree. So this is how it looks. This is the two oak samples, and this is why I showed you earlier the structure of a ringwood, because as you see, if the last ring, it's very important to find the last ring again, one small interlacing, because for dating, the most important ring is the exterior, the outer one. before the last one, which was formed before the tree was felled, because that is the year when he was felled. And in most of the cases, the carpenters or the people who work with that, most of the cases, in many cases, they are cutting it or they are clearing it, because this is full of nutrition, and also the insects attack this part of the wood, which gets full of nutrition. It's not that dry as the interior one. But if we have the outer wood, which is called in English terms, in German terms, Erdkante, as you see, we have the early wood and the late wood. So this means if the ring is intact, because the early and the late, that means that the tree was felled, was cut after the vegetation period, somewhere in late autumn or winter or early spring. If the ringwood contains only the early wood, it was felled during the vegetation period, very probably in summer. So, dendrochronology has several utilizations. As I told you, when I go to real dendrochronology conferences, I'm lost, because the majority of the presentations are physics, biologics, and genetics, which I don't have nothing to do. But for us, it's very important, because our background is archaeology, is archaeology, so we deal. And when we talk about we, it's my wife Boglárka, she makes the measurements. My bigger fellow, he's an alchemist and also an archaeologist from Liège. It's interesting that our team, we work in Romania, but our team is very, how should I say, international, without any background or intentions. I come from Romania, Boglárka is from Hungary, and Denis is from Belgium. So what we do from this large type of dendrochronological research is only dating, only chronological help for people who ask our help. Which are the minimum conditions, the minimum requirements for a good dendrochronological dating? As I told you, minimum 30, 50 yearlings. Two species, at least in our region, we have 3 species, Norway spruce, silverfir, and oak. So we cannot deal with other samples, because simply we don't have the chronology for it. And as I mentioned before, we need at least 8-10 samples from a period, from a structure, to again to make this medium, to exclude only all exterior, all extreme, all individual influences, to have a better chance to date. And after this introduction about the method, some practical examples, what we have done in the last years. So some, how should I say, the most interesting, one of the most interesting data which we have made. Sibiu is in the south of Transylvania. It was formerly a great Saxon village or town. And this is, as you see, a huge roof with more separate individual roofs above the chancel, above the nave, the collateral, in the ship, and so on. And in the zone B, as it mentions in the plan, about the chancel, when we took samples, it was made from silverfir. What we found that the roof of the chancel was made of trees cut in these years, 1393, 1395. But this was the interesting part. We found also reused elements with joint signs without function, which were much more earlier. They were cut, they came from trees cut in the winter of 1339, very probably built in the summer of 1339. And as we step further, as we step further here, we found roof, which was dated much more later elements. But again, we had some signs of joints without function of the present actual truss and roof. And based on this, we had the chance to make a reconstruction of the original truss, how it was made, and these secondary reused elements were much more earlier, from the middle of the 14th century, 1353, and so on. Using dendrochronology, we had together, I guess, above 100 samples from the whole roof. We had the possibility to reconstruct the construction site and the period and the steps how this building was made, because it's very important that in many cases, even people usually do not believe us, but the roof dates the structure, the building beneath it. And this is very important because CBU and this church is in a good location, easy to access, but nobody had a good periodization of construction history of this building. And using Dendro, we managed to reconstruct the medieval steps, how it was made. From reused elements, which I mentioned, we are pretty sure that the choir was built in 1339. After more than 10 years, the collateral and the transept was built in the middle of the century. Afterwards, again, more than 1 decade, it was built the roof above the ship. And very interesting that we found elements from the end of the century, 1396 to 1397, when this was the first reconstruction, or how should I say, restoration of the roof. By the end of the century, came some carpenters, very probably in Germany or from other region, with a total different concept. And before that, all the trusses were made without longitudinal strength elements, just trusses after each other, near each other. And the new engineer, how should I say, new knowledge came by the end of the century, and he said that this is technically not strong enough, we need to strengthen it. So he put a longitudinal rigidization system which covers the whole system from that. So we have a periodization of the roof, and also the first restoration. They probably win a EU project or something, they had money and they said that we need a restoration, and they put new elements, longitudinal rigidization, strengthening elements into the system. And after the ferrula, western from the tower by the middle of the 15th century, and so on, early 16th century, the south collateral made. At that period when you were working, we did not have chronology for this side. This is made by Norway Spruce, and here we did not have chronology and samples from that. So I wish that some years, sometime we should go back and try to check and sample these things, and we probably will manage to date it also. And from a big urban church to a very small village church from different religion, it's an Orthodox church in Velar, Hunedoara, the mountain region of South Transylvania. It's an abandoned church. Unfortunately, the Romanian Orthodoxes used to have this very small, very mystic, very nice, good atmosphere wooden churches, but in the modern times they are building new and new beton churches. I don't know saying nothing about it. I'm being Hungarian Catholic, it wouldn't be polite, but for me, these traditional wooden buildings represent the real, traditional Orthodox building and church history. And this is naturally is abandoned. We took samples from different sites, different parts of it, trying to have an internal periodization for this church. And what we managed to conclude that we have a church built in the 17th century, end of 17th century, 1675, I guess. And what was interesting is that the samples from the tower are much later. So it seems that the tower, the small bell tower, was put on the church later. At this stage, we didn't make too much thing of it, because it was our first experience. Afterwards, working with more wooden churches from several regions of Transylvania, it seems that this is a traditional way of building these wooden churches. Almost all of them, only one exception, all of them got their wooden bell towers in a much later period. So this seems to be a general thing, that they usually have a different scale wooden churches from very small one of these, from a bigger one from Maramuresh, and as you see, very small bell towers, or huge one, monumental one, but all of them came in a later period. So this is, I guess, a general characteristic which can be used also for architects and art historians in Orthodox buildings. The other thing which we try to learn and to practice is the non-invasive data collection of furniture, altar pieces, and furniture ceilings. Because you can imagine if we take the samples from a roof or from a beam with drill, it's natural. Which if I would come with a drill to an altar piece or to such a door, the local priest would kill me and he would be right. So in these cases, we try to took our data without major invasion. And this is one piece, one example of cleaning the bottom of the boards. As you see, we can clean it, and with a looper, the manual looper, Boglárka measures the ring width and dictates the value. Another example of a very famous altar piece in Maninka. As you can see, the back side is clean. We didn't even have to make any interventions, and the rings could be measured on the back side of the boards. This is how it looks like. The measuring and something like Boglárka sees. And you can imagine that she is dictating that it should be 0.5, 0.2, 0.4, I don't know, something is driving it. And afterwards, when you go back home, we should digitalize all this data and make it to a chronology or a series. And I took this example from more reasons. This is a very small church near where we live in Saint-Dominique. And this altar panel is a huge one. And this came from a very small village church. And all the art historians were saying that this is an import piece from Salzburg. And I always ask myself, how is that this is a very small church, a poor church? How did it have such a big altar? Direct from Salzburg. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the connection. I just don't get it. So that's why we measured, as you see, the boards again here. This was the first time we used photographic with scale, and after making the photographs, the measurements, the ring widths were measured later on the at home in the laboratory. So the one thing is that we have a datation, which is not too sharp because the exterior earrings were missing. So datation is not that sharp, but it is somewhere in the end of the 15th century. But which was much more interesting, that we managed to prove that it is not coming from Austria, not at all. Because the wood, the chronology bit was able to date it, it's local, it's from Transylvania, and more probably from South Transylvania. So this, the knowledge of the painter could have come from Austria, but he surely painted his altar panel in Transylvania from local wood. Another example is Brașov, this very famous church in southeast Transylvania. Here we had a big fire. That's why it's called Black Church. And again, all the datation is very sharp after the fire, which is naturally, so it's in itself is not a sensation. Which is interesting that also oak, they used oak and also silver fin on the roof. All of them came from the same period. This is very good because we all, at least when you are beginners, you always have this doubt: is this our datation really good? Because we give some years to the priest or to the architect that is it really good? But when we had cross-dating from different species, that was a verification, and it was very good to say that if the oak chronology, which is totally independent from the silver chronology, and both of them give us the same year, but both of them are verified by each other, so we are good. So that's why Brașov and the Black Church was very important for us. But more important for us, and this is again a good lecture or lesson, excuse me, that this is a topos that Brașov, the whole city burned, but nothing remained. We facing this. Imagine very many times that the priest or the art historian is saying that you should not look here because the Tatars, the Mongols, the Romanians, the Germans, everybody was coming and everybody had nothing better to do just to burn our churches. It's not. Yes, devastation took place, fire took place in many cases, sure, but not tabula rasa for sure. And the Black Church was interesting because, as you know, or you read in any paper or any guidebook, the inner city burned, yes, sure. And we are in the tower of the Black Church, and this is the building just a few meters, 10 meters from the entrance. And in the first floor, but the restoration found ceiling beams, which were dated in the middle, in the end, by the first part of the 16th century, 1 century and a half earlier than the fire. So the whole city burned, no way. We had earlier wooden in situ elements just near the city. So again, this topos should be considered with much more careful. Another site is the Almavi. It's a so-called Saxon fortified church, a classic one. And we were told that these towers should be different ages. We were told that it should have been an earlier defense wall with a tower which had disappeared. And our dendrological data proved that all of them were built much or less in the same period. And as you see, the restoration got the winner of the conservation and the effective use last year, but which was much more important for us, that it has a very complicated roof and a very complicated defense system about the stone tower, and also wooden inside in situ elements inside the tower. And as you see, it's a very narrow place with many wood structures, so we didn't understand it actually when we were upstairs. We saw that it should be one structure because it's connected with that. That one's not connected, it should be different, but it was a labyrinth for us. But the dendro was very helpful for us afterwards, because all of them gave us each group, each intervention, each later restoration element. You can see very easily and very firmly the different periods of interventions in this tower. Sighișoara, it's a former Dominican church. It's in the middle of Transylvania. It was a very good lesson for us, because we thought after 10 years, 15 years that now we have high score rules. We are pretty good in it. And we went upstairs in this room and we said, this is edible and this should be later. This is called in the local terminology that they call it Gothic shade and Baroque shade. And we said that they're pretty like this should be. And when we took samples, as you see, totally different logic, totally different engineering concept for the roof. And the marks, carpenter marks were totally different. So it really looked like the two separate things. And we said that we have the knowledge is separate two different periods. And again, the dendro came and taught us to have much more little things, because the two structures are, both of them came from trees felled in the same year. So we have two different types of roots, totally different engineering concept, totally different typology, but the trees are felled in the same period, in the same year, not probably, surely after the fire. And we had a lot that Boglárka worked together with an art historian, and she found also the written sources which mentioned that yes, after the fire we were in big trouble. We needed carpenters. And such a lot, because in Sighișoara we had two carpenters from Austria. I don't remember the names. Let's say Michael and Sebastian. And we were such a hurry that Sebastian worked on the choir and Michael worked on the nave, and we finished the work. It looks like one of them had the knowledge of this kind of trusses, the other had the knowledge from other kind of trusses, but they used the same wood, probably both by the locals and the priests from the same forest, and gave it to them. And both of them were playing Lego with the timber which they had. They built totally different roof structures in the same period, which means again for us to be much more human. And from the other side, it means that this type of terminology which was used at Gothic and Baroque, it's not very good to use, because automatically you think that it's some kind of chronology. You automatically think it's some kind of different culture. So different type of trusses live together parallelly, and the use of these terminologies may be misleading. And again, from a very big church, from Sigishwara, to a very small church in Kilyen, Shepshipil. It was interesting because we found also a construction bay. So it was repaired in 1799. It's interesting, the Dendro gave the same date. Again, women, very good. But again, we step backwards, as we see, without function. And we take samples from that. Naturally, there are much more earlier, from the early 16th century. And this is again interesting from the view of the construction site. How long is a church constructed? Because above this south entrance here, we have an inscription dated 1497, but the roof above is with a decade later. So this means that very probably, even we talk about a very small church, very probably the construction site, the construction process took at least 10 years along. And the publication for it, but I will talk it about later. So what we have now, where we stand right now, we have around 400 sites researched in the last 2 decades. And as I have to mention, we were rookies, we were newbies on this thing. So all 3 of us are archaeologists. We have to learn how to sample, we have to learn how to measure. The measurement is made by Oblato. We have to learn the structure, typology. We have to learn how to interpret dental data. But after these 2 decades, we managed to reach to the 13th century with Quercus in WS Alba with oak and silverfield, and with Picea a bit earlier, later times. So now we have 150 dated historical roof structures, and the main target in our mind is to write a book, monography of historical roofs in Transylvania. So this is what we are working right now. And let's step on the next topic on forest and forestry history. First of all, I have to say that our main focus is dating, so this is a very interesting topic. The Dendro database has the potential for Dendro and forestry history and so on, and climate research, but till now we did not have the knowledge, the experience, and the time to use it. But even so, we managed to drag some conclusions regarding about this. But I had to underline again that this was not our main topic, not our main focus, so the potential is still there. What we have learned that in the first period, in the middle of the time, inside the mid-mountains, all of the structures were exclusively built from oak. All of the structures. We have very few other examples, which one is Sibiu, which I'll mention, and another is Bistrica. But as you see at the location, both of them are by the feet of big mountains. So in these cases, the carpenters used local wood, silverfield, which means in other words, and we know that in the area of Sibiu and also in Bistrica, in the area, there are oaks also. This means that if they have the potential, if they have a choice, the carpenters took the silverfield. Why? Because the silverfield or the coniferous woods are much more easier to work with. It's lighter, it's easier to transport, it's easier to work with. As the weight, it's much more easier. So if they had a chance, they use it. We have only one exception. This is exactly our area. This is where we live in Eastern Carpathians, these are intramountain bases, because we have no race spruce. And again, from different sources, toponymy, written sources, and so on, I know that this region also had oaks, even if now we do not have. but in the medieval time, surely that we have elements, basic elements from monuments, as I mentioned earlier. And again, this means that if the carpenters could had the choice to choose between different species, they took the Norway spruce or the Abiesada, the silver fir. And in modern times, it looks like Norway spruce start to get dominating only later, which means that we have a chronological difference between the medieval times or early modern times and late modern times or recent times, very probably because the clearing effect, the clearing of the forest reached that altitude where the Norway spruce lived. Earlier they had oak, and that was enough for them, but from the 18th, 19th century they reached the forest line of the Norway spruce, and from the 19th century the Norway spruce became dominating monoculture, so we do not found silver fir or oak in 19th, 20th century roots. So this is a change in use of the species. And again, some examples of what kind of trees and what kind of forest they have. I repeat myself, to have a good database from this point of view, we need also the pith and outputs of the bark of the wood. But this is not our target. Our target is the exterior rings. So we do not have in all of the cases the center, the oldest earring of a timber, of example. But even so, we can see that we have some roofs, we have solid sites where they used very young elements coming from very young forests, 30, 40 years maximum. This means that in the area they had the deforestation. They do not have old forests for it. In other cases we have so-called natural forest, when they had young trees and also old trees in the same time, which is the best situation. If you know, in the recent times, in Austria and Czech and Germany, they had big problems with the forests because of the monoculture. All the forests had the same age. Deforestation, planting, and the same age forest grows afterwards. This is, from a natural point of view, the worst, because if they have a biological insect, a fungi attack, or climate change, they will suffer together. If the forest is mixed by age or by species, he has more chances to survive. So this would be the best, a better chance for living. And also we have some examples of very, very old forests, where all of the forests are older than 100 years, even more, some of them 150. So our database has the potential to make a reconstruction of different forests and even forest management. When I talk about forest management, I think of this, when all of the samples start almost in the same period, that means that these forests started to grow after the deforestation. So they cut all the trees in a hill or in a mountain. Plantation or natural planting took place, and the trees started to grow almost in the same period. And from a chronological point of view, it's a single site, Turbinyes, former Franciscan church, where we have a 15th century roof, which was devastated by fire in a later time. And what we see from forest tribe or forest history point of view, we see the early roof, the original roof of the church from 15th century was pretty long, pretty old, made from pretty old timber, trees. And when they made the reconstruction from this zone, from this area, which was made in the early 15th century, they did not have these forests. I don't know what happened with this one, but they only had much younger trees for the reconstruction. This means that in the meantime, all the property, all the area, something has been changed, because the forest sources were totally different as some centuries before. And again, in this situation, we may presume a deforestation. Afterwards, the forest started to grow. And one step again back to Brasov, just to underline that it seems that even species or forests from different species may have been treated in separate way, in different ways, because the Abies alba, which comes from a forest which is visibly younger than the oak forest. As you see, these elements are 1, 2, 3, 5, almost 4 decades older than the Abies alba forest from when the timber came from the roof of the structure. So I guess I will stop here. If you have some questions, I will ask you. I have some other thoughts, but I don't want to take your time too much. But one thing I would like to show you or tell you. This is about my region and the effects of mining and so on. This is not strongly connected with the forestry and the dendrochronology, but which I would like to share you that we are a very small team, as you see, with no institutional background behind us, but even so we think that this knowledge should be spread as wide as possible. So we have a site, then Dendrolab, but you can see dendrolab.ro, which is three languages, Hungarian, Romanian, and English. And in this site we try to publish all of the data we have. Naturally, the homework is not always done, so we are at least 1 year back or 2 years back homework to do. But we have the locations, and you can click on it, and you can see a short resume, and the publication related to that side of that research. And also on our academia.edu profiles, you can access to our publications, and you can download from PDF our publications. And the other thing which I think it's very important that we accept as many invitations, Belgrade is the same, as possible, because we think that spreading this knowledge is important. So I go to elementary school, theology universities from Budapest, Szeged, Sibiu, whatever, and we took place in many summer camps, university gathering, just to speak about these things, because I think that forests and wooden cultural heritage is a very endangered cultural heritage part, which needs our attention and our protection, because this is the most dangerous part. The stone walls can remain for centuries, a roof can be changed in a month. So thank you for your attention, and thank you again for the invitation. Depends from the chronology of your material. So actually our main focus is Transylvania, but in the last years we started to work also south from the Carpathians, in Gorj and Mehedinsk counties, which are very close to the Danube. And we have also some samples from the Banat, yes, of course. But it depends which is the date of your material, because as you saw, our lowest chronology reaches only the 13th century. So it depends from that. If it's earlier, we cannot date it for sure. But this is a problem also in Romania. I'm an archaeologist, and I met archaeologists, my colleagues, because I was in several archaeological conferences and was saying that we are here, we need material. We won't date it, not now, but in 5 years, 10 years. Maybe if we build together the database, we will succeed. But therefore, I need data. I don't know, the Romanian archaeologists just don't believe in Dendro or don't believe in me, I don't know. That is up. I don't know why. So we are open for every sample collection for sure, but I can give you a contact. I have a very good friend, friend of Polish, Tomasz Ważny. He was working also in Greek and Serbia, I don't know, but Bulgaria for sure. And he has some kind of technologies which are available for the Balkans, for the region south from the Danube. So if you have samples, we can help you measure it and send him the data, or take the contact with Tomasz, and maybe he can somehow he gets the samples from you, he measures it. So I think that these kind of operations are essential, because day by day we are losing material. The construction are going, excavation are going, nobody takes care of these woods, these wood elements. So we need to collect as much as possible, and you probably won't get a date right now, but in 10 years you should. As the time goes by, and we have more and more, we or you, whatever, not about how we go into it. We need data, and after some couple of years, we will manage anybody to date things. This is essential. So we can talk later, or you can write an email, and I will send you the contact of Tomasz, and we can talk about it. We are open. big enough. It has to contain at least, as I told, at least 30 buildings, so it has to be a bigger charcoal actually. But the charcoal also can be measured, and naturally it's much more harder than burn. Yes, carbon has to be burned. It can be measured naturally, not that easy because with a timber we can cut it with the flat surface. You cannot measure the charcoal or burn stuff will be that easy, but it can be done. So the possibility is still there. Let's say that this is a timber from the 14th century. So if I know that the exterior, the youngest bearing, it's, let's say it's 130, and it's 200 years old, then I know that the oldest thing is 1,100. So that's it. The problem is that I cannot date with this one because for a good date I need an interlacing. So our oldest rings are from early 13th century, the oldest rings. But the datation can be made at least after 30 years. So the first datation are possibly only here, even if I have 30 rings, because I need a interlacing which is longer than 30 years. I don't know if I answered the question. We have the chance, yes, because we have that, we have enough interlace overlapping. Yes. Excuse me. That is possible if we have. But we don't have the samples from this period. A few years ago, we had a project focused on this. We went to the old Saxon churches from about which the art historians were saying that the tower is 13th century. Middle, first part, second part, I don't know, 13th century. And our idea was, let's say it's late 13th century, 1285, after the Mongol invasion, no problem. But if they have a big timber in it, in the wall, if that is 200 years old, made from 200 years old oak, so we reached in the 11th century. And we visited, I don't know, 12, 15 so-called Romanic towers, and we didn't find in situ wood in it. It was killing. or replaced, or burned, or reconstructed. We visited only those. It was Fabini, it's a great Romanian art historian, and he has a huge monography about Saxon churches, and we read only those with 13th century. We had a list, and we visited tak, 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 and we didn't find any institute. They are, I'm sure that they are still in other places, but at least when we visited, we didn't find it. But why I'm saying that the possibility is there? Last year or 2 years ago, we had a church in Vistea near Cluj-Napoca, and it's a Romanic church. It's very nice looking, but nothing specific. And we found it has wall paintings, frescoes from the early 14th century, and those frescoes, one of them was overlapping a timber. So from archaeological point of view, it was a very good stratigraphy that first timber, after the painting, after the fresco. Fresco is 14th century, the wood should be earlier. We drilled, we sampled, and indeed it was early 14th century. Nice problem solved, okay. That this means, and this is very close to Cluj, to a big center. It's a known church, not hidden in a valley or in the upstairs mountain, and still had preserved 14th century elements. So I'm pretty sure that the Mongols, I don't want to characterize them, but they didn't have this duty to go in every village. We have a church, let's burn it. Oh, there is it, let's burn it. It doesn't make sense. They were killing, they were getting things, but it was not a homework for them to do, to burn anything. So I'm pretty sure that there are still some churches from the 13th century with in situ elements, even from the after the Baroque or Gothic reconstructions, the inside elements in the tower, up above the doors, above the gates, they're still there. We just should find them, not with the art historians, the archaeologists should find them, call us. So the possibility is still there. Why?